Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're on page 1400. So, in reviewing what we're learning here, I feel it's important to sum up a particular flow, which I think will help tremendously in understanding the entire structure. So, the theme of Ayin Beis, we know, is the theme of interface. The interface between the divine and existence, between the transcendent and the immanent. Or in the language of the Hemshech, Keser, Reimamus, Aramimcha, and the 10 spheres, Elikai HaMelech, as the divine relates to existence. With Keser, which is beyond. In Keser itself, there's the two states, Atikanarich, Chochma, the hidden Chochma that's hidden from us but not completely removed, and the hidden that's completely removed, completely hidden. And throughout Ayin Beis, you've seen this theme again and again, the interface. And for it to work well, it has to be on both terms. It has to be purely divine, pure Ein Sof, but also purely human, meaning purely us, or else something is compromised. And that's why it's so challenging, because you're talking about two antithetical realities, our consciousness and divine consciousness. But it's a process, and the process is all embedded into our beings. That's our faculties. This includes our emotions, our minds. And as we climb the ladder in our work of refining ourselves and refining the tzimtzum within ourselves and that which is concealed in the animal soul, and going from the mutfe, murgish, muskel, from our emotions, subjective emotions, to a more objective picture, to a even more objective one, ultimately to seeing the big horizons of a higher divine reality. This allows our consciousness to merge and fuse with God's consciousness, all the way even to before the tzimtzum, where there was nothing but divine consciousness. But we have to take into account every aspect of our lives, both the revealed aspects, the concealed aspects, which is why there's the concept of Havayu Elokim, demonstrating that even the concealment is just a channel for the revelation, but also dealing with real darkness. The actual darkness is also transformed. So in the latter part of, middle of volume 2, all the way till page 1350, the Rebbe Rashab began, first he began saying that there are two general methods, mamata l'mayla, mamai l'mata, aramimcha l'kaya melech. Mamata l'mayla, like through tefillah, is our initiative. We reach out. In our feelings of distance or darkness or even distress, we call out. That's what prayer is. And we reach upward, and as we climb, we try to connect to these higher states. To the point that he explained the pasuk v'yadaita hayom v'shavesa levavecha. That's the way we do it. V'yadaita, you shall know today, and he explained what hayom meant in detail, and you shall take it to your heart, carry it into your heart. That what havayu elikim, that avaya, the transcendence is who elikim is the immanent. B'shamayim imal v'aretz mitachas, in the highest levels to the lowest levels, as we learn the meaning of all these different phrases. Einoid, and that was the final in volume 3 to explain Einoid. Einoid means that the tzimtzum itself is transformed. Not just that it becomes a channel for light, not just Havayu Elikim, but that the Helam itself, the moon itself, Malchus itself, the body itself, the material itself becomes an expression of divine power and of the highest divine, even higher than Giluyim of Ur. Like we spoke, how the Keli reveals more than the Ur does ultimately. Reveals meaning reaches a higher state. All this was mostly Mamata Lamaila, with also, of course, it included plenty of discussion about Torah too, and plenty of Mamata Lamata too, but still the lens that he spoke about for over 550 pages was Mamata Lamaila. On top of page 1350, the Rebbe Rashab went and started not from the yesh to the ayin, but from the ayin to the yesh. Ma'ayin liyesh. I'm reading the top of page 1350, which is a level of ayin. Chochma, and from there you draw down into existence. That's what Torah is. I heard a line that the Ragat Shavar once said that when I daven, I speaking to Hashem. When I learn, Hashem is speaking to me. A beautiful way of putting it. So here Hashem is speaking to us. He's telling us what he carries, his wisdom, his intentions, his Torah. However, it has to be integrated. Remember, the interface, it's not just coming from above down. We have to internalize it, which is why there's Mishnah, Mikra, Talmud, Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, where we learn Torah and we understand Torah and we try to internalize it into our lives. And we do internalize it. Okay. And then he asked a few questions about this. He started speaking about Ubir Inyan, Ner Mitzvah v'Teira Eir, that the mitzvah is called Ner and Teira is called Eir, and brought that also the Neshama is also called Ner. And then he asked a few questions about that. What's the difference between the flame of a mitzvah and the flame of a neshama? Well, the other way around, the ner of a neshama or the ner of a mitzvah. And then he continued and said another thing, another question, that both neshamas and Torah both give us an image of God. They both give us a picture of God. But what's the difference? Why is this so relevant, this question? Because now that you're bringing Torah into the picture, why is a neshama not enough? Since we were created in the divine image and we reflect God's thought, so we have that within us. So why not a neshama with tefillah can accomplish everything? And yet Torah gives us something that we don't have on our own, which is going to be a big part of the theme that we're going to be learning. And I'll explain in a moment, but let me just go over to what he said there on page 1350. This is very vital in the whole flow of Ayin Beis. Okay. This is a second. So he says there that the Eibishtan zone is like Adamhu. He does not have any image. But we want an interface. We want the connection to God. So God manifested in a type of tziyur adam. That's why we have Tzameinu Kidmusenu. It says Kiloy Adam but Yisrael Olam Machshava Ayidezeh Naset Tziyur Adam. Now Torah is also called Zeis Teres Adam. So he asked the question. So what Ma'u Aheferish L'Mayla Ben Tziyur Adam? The Neshama is the Tziyur Adam the Torah. Now, I wrote for myself on the side on the margin that in Ayin Beis you don't find a direct answer to this question. But in thinking about this over the last few days, I think that there is an answer, and we'll get there when we learn later. But I wanted to talk about it because I realized that what he's developing now is so much part of understanding this transition on page 1350. I'll explain in a moment. Okay, then he goes on to explain the difference between Ner Mitzvah. He goes on to explain what is Ner Neshama and Ner Mitzvah. And he speaks about a Ner has three things. A wick, psila, the shemen, the fuel, and the flame it creates. And he says like this. The psila, he says, is the divine soul that manifests here below inside the body. That's the psila. I'm summing up page 1350, 1351, 1352. Okay. the fuel is the nefesh habamis. Nefesh habamis provides the fuel. I just want to see the exact language that he uses. Hashem hu aseichel hativi de nefesh habamis. So it's the animal soul and its mind, and that when you use it properly in Aveda, you're taking the shemen of the animal soul and you're turning it into fuel that feeds the nefesh halikis, the psila, and that in turn creates a flame. That's what he says about basically, through our hard work, our yigiyah, in our contemplation of the divine and our emotions of love and reverence, it creates a bitl in the nefesh habamis, which is the whole purpose of why the neshama came down, the psila came down in the first place. And that draws down a new gili er chadash that you cannot have gotten without the animal soul. Then he goes on to explain that these three things are also in a mitzvah. The psila is the mitzvah, the rotzna elyon, the wick. Yeah. One second. The nefesh habamis, and the same idea. When you do a mitzvah with the physical world and with the animal soul, you create a light. You create the oyer that the flame that's produced from it. Okay. Then he said, "V'nirali levayer ha'inyan," that appears to me to explain this. Let's discuss about vision, eyesight. So that's why I went back to this to see the whole idea of riyah, of eyesight that we're discussing, was coming to explain this idea of the transformation that happens through a flame, and ultimately to explain what Torah is, and how Torah contributes to the neshama. So in doing so, the Rebbe Rashab then went on to explain eyesight, and then introduced the moonlight and the luminous stone. Then he said these three correspond to the three levels in Torah: Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud. Because Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud is in Bria, like the moonlight. Mishnah is Yitzira, like the luminous stone. And he doesn't say it explicitly, but apparently Mikra Nasi is like the eye, the vision of the eye. And now he's coming back to explain that in detail here, where we are now, where we started on the bottom of page 1398. So briefly, what he's saying here is that the eye has two elements to it. One is the way it manifests in the physical eye. So then the eyesight is limited. You can't see in the dark. You need an external light to see in the dark. You can't see very far. You can only see a certain far. But the etzem koyach hariyah, the very power of vision that God gave us, comes from Chochma, that does have the ability to see endlessly and doesn't need an external light. Then he began explaining how this is Einei Ha'eda. That's the last thing we learned. These are the eyes of the community, of the Sanhedrin, the leaders, because they are able to draw from the hidden world, Alma discuss, into the revealed world. That's why they're Einayim, their eyes. That's what an eye does. That they're able to draw from like he said, bracha, that they designated the blessings. A bracha is mamshik from a higher place to a lower place. And how does it do it? Like he said, from the Likutei Torah, by contemplating on godliness, but not just contemplating, making sure that it penetrates the heart and penetrates the emotions. Now, what is this leading up to? I'll tell you what it's leading up to. He's going to explain the two aspects here. A neshama ultimately is like Einei Ha'eda. The neshama has the ability to see. But in this world, once a neshama comes into this world, it gets concealed. And that's why it needs Torah. That's why it needs Torah, because Torah is a revealer, Torah Eir. Torah reveals the divine, so it's like the external light that the eye needs to be able to see in the dark. But ultimately, it will reveal how the eye itself is rooted in a place that's higher than Torah. That the neshamas actually are higher than Torah, but they need the Torah to get them to that place. That's essentially where he's going to go with all of this. So ultimately, he's going to come back to explain the whole idea of Ner Mitzvah and Torah Er, and what Torah contributes, what a mitzvah is, that you come down to this world that's concealed in the animal soul. But ultimately, it will propel us to come to a place that's even higher, that doesn't need light from outside. It itself will generate light. And that's the role of Neshamas and Torah that we're going to be learning about later. The point I want to make is that even though Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud was a central component in this whole discussion, it really begins much earlier in the flow of understanding what Torah really is, in contrast to Neshamas. And ultimately, Torah, mitzvahs, and Neshamas. So we're going to learn all this, how Torah, how Neshamas with Tefillah, taken from the bottom up, how Torah brings in the light, that brings in Oir, that allows the eyes to see. But ultimately, the Neshamas themselves will elevate to a place that's higher than Torah. That doesn't mean Torah won't have a role to play. It'll just all come together, as we shall learn. I just wanted to bring this together into one context here. This is all going to emerge much, much later, after the Rebbe Rashab explains at length what we're discussing now. Okay. So clearly the neshama, as much as it's a high level, it needs to have the psila, needs to have the shemen that ultimately creates that oir. And Torah does it even greater, because Torah is even higher than mitzvah. Okay. So to bring back where we are right now, so we said, as I said, Sanhedrin is Einei Ha'eda, and like the eyes of the body, like he says from the Zohar, Kamad the kol shayfen gufa le azlan ela basar einin, va'einin inu min haga, man haga the kol gufa. So just as all the paths of the body, all the flows of the body only follow the eyes, and the eyes are like the manik, they govern, they rule, they guide, is the best word, they guide. So too, uf malkin, the Sanhedrin, v'chol inu shliten, kula azlan basrayu. Everything follows them, the leaders, the kings, and the Sanhedrin, like the eyes. They radiate to the whole people, to the Chol Ha'eda, v'kuln azan ha'basrayu, b'bchinas er v'gilizeh. So that's what Sanhedrin's role is. They're like the eyes of the nation, the eyes of the people. What is eyes? Eyes are guide. They see clearly and they guide. Now, with that, he explains why the Chachamim tiknu birchas hamitzvahs. So I'm going to go over this now in more detail. I also said I would look up the Maimorim, which I did, the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe that he quotes, and I'll interweave it into our discussion here. So one of the things that Chachamim did, like the Alter Rebbe says, the B'bayis Rishon, he writes, there were no birchas hamitzvahs. You just did a mitzvah, you didn't make a bracha. In Bayis Sheni, the Chachamim were mesaken a bracha. And he explains why. Because in Bayis Rishon, the gilui of Elikus through a mitzvah was enough. In Bayis Sheni, since things were concealed, they were missing 5 things in the Beis HaMikdash. I know the Elikus was not so much there in a revealed way. So therefore, they were mesaken the brachas, a bracha to reveal that which they couldn't get access on their own, as they did in the first Beis HaMikdash. And that's the end of a bracha. Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'elam va'ad elam. reveals from the hidden worlds Alma Discussion into Alma Disgalia. Basically, and that's what he brings, because like he says, Kol Yisrael im Aminim b'nei Ma'aminim, that's what the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah Eir. In Amunah Pshuta, actually in Torah he doesn't use the word Pshuta, he just says Amunah. And now I can explain why he brings the parentheses, Mazlayu Chazi. That's higher than Mazlayu Chazi, because Mazlayu means still something of some of direction that the Mazel is telling you. Amunah is Amunah Pshuta. It's higher than the Mazel. However, the Mazel elsewhere explains, gives intensity to it. So Mazlayu is the Mazel that's already lower and closer. Amunah is a higher level. And what's the Ayin of Bracha? The Bracha Liyas Amunah ki ilu roya. The Bracha is to bring the Amunah, it shouldn't remain makif. And beyond us, he brings the Ganva Pu Machtarta Rachmana Karya, like a Ganef, who could have Amunah and thank Hash and pray to God to succeed, because there's a dissonance. The Bracha makes sure that that comes down, ki ilu roya, that he sees it begili. And then he brings from the Likutei Torah Evaschanon. That means not just to contemplate ungodliness, but to make sure that it penetrates within the heart, that it become one with us, integrated. Should be negei al atzmus hanefesh mamish. Now, I asked the question: why did the Alter Rebbe? Why does he bring here ilu zeis leituchel nefesh? Ilu zeis, I translated, however, I believe ilu zeis here means, and because of that, not however. The iluzes, and due to that, because the soul and the heart now are palpably experiencing the divine, they cannot contain it. So what happens is it causes them to want to yearn, to long, to connect to the nefesh in its source. Now, I'm not sure whether iluzes should be translated however, or it should be translated because of. That I'm not positive. It could be both. Rab Shlomo, you're here. Iluzes kementaichen beide wegen, right? Both ways. You could say iluzes however, or iluzes because of. No? Okay, regardless, bottom line is that this is the meaning of what he says there. So that's what brachas do. As he continues, the bracha brings from the Mokar Achayis, from Keser, which is higher than existence, and to draw that down into Moichin of Atzilus, to bring them a new energy. That's what a bracha does. From Atik, yeah, so this is the brachas that the Chachamim were Mesakin, Einei Eda, because they're the eyes. So they have the power to bring that vision, that clarity. Yeah. The Istaklus Abba Ve'ima, the Arachampin is all from the Likutei Torah, the Bir Likutei Torah. And that gives the power of the Koyach HaZivuk, the ability to create a union, which comes as a result of this gazing, this riyah. Yeah. Now, what we didn't learn was the parentheses, which is what I'm going to learn now. So bottom line is, the Sanhedrin, these leaders are like the visionaries. They're like the eyes, and that's what the eyes do. The eyes draw down from a deeper place into being able to experience it in a palpable way. And then we learn that after the end of the parentheses. So I'm going to learn now the parentheses, and then I'll finish till the end of the paragraph in more detail. Okay. So now comes the question, this revelation that comes through vision, is it like a reflection, meaning only like light, or does it have something that's more atzmis, that's more of a core? Because, for example, regular light doesn't have anything at its core. All it is a revealer. When you turn on the light in the room, the light doesn't accomplish anything. The light doesn't draw anything new. All it's doing is shining so you can see the objects in the room. But we've been talking that there's also in Riyah, we talked about atzmi, that there's something in it that's fundamental, that it itself has the power to see. It's not just a light from outside. That's why the fact that there's light from the outside is not enough for us to see. You have to also have eyes. So this is what he's going to address in the parentheses. Because he says the gazing creates a zivug, creates a union. That's a very powerful statement. When you look at someone, that could be an affectionate look, but it doesn't mean something's created from it. So the Rebbe Rashab says, that when you see a state of histaklus, b'chinas riyah, l'mayla ma'atzilus, it's not ashpa atzmis. Nothing's happening. When I look at you, or when two people who love each other look at each other, what does it accomplish? It's just an affectionate look. There's something actually created by it. So only ha'ara, not ashpa atzmis. Ubeitz Chaim Isa, and Eitz Chaim it says, the hevel einayim, that the cavity of the eyes, hu poches gamma hevel eisen chaytem peh, that the cavity of the eyes is lower in a lower level than the cavity of the ears, of the nose and the mouth. Remember, in the head, we have several cavities. Cavity means not an opening. So we have the two eyes, we have two ears, we have two nostrils and a mouth. 7. So in Kabbalah, in Eitz Chaim, it explains that these different avolim are different cavities and channels that bring the energy of Adam Kadmon to the lower worlds. So Eisen Chaytem Peh is considered to be higher cavities, the ears and the nostrils and the mouth, he says, are higher than the Hevel Einayim, than the cavities of the eyes. So based on that, it seems like it's not atzmi, it's only a channel that brings that allows us to see. However, the Rebbe Rashab qualifies now and says, no, it's not the case. From what it says in Eitz Chaim Shad Nekudim Perek Aleph, Memoshel Beitzas Bas Hayayona. Shenelad ha'efrech min ha'istaklos. So he brings there, a Bas Hayayona is, I think, a dove. What's a Bas Hayayona? Sometimes a yona is a dove, but a Bas Hayayona is a...
It's a big bird that is very tall, Bas Hayano.
Yeah, like the ostrich?
It's very tall. Taller
is it than ostrich? Is it an ostrich?
It could be.
Let me see. Yeah, ostrich. Yeah, it's the ostrich. I believe it's an ostrich. Yeah. So he brings there, he also brings, I think, about the Yena, by the Yenim. But anyway, Basayon. So he says like this. In Eitz Chaim, it says that when they gaze at each other, they actually creates a form of creates the conception of an egg. Beitzes Bashan Shenela de Efrech. The chick will be born from istakos. When they stare at each other without even physically touching, it arouses the female that actually creates like a fertilization that will bear a chick. I don't know how it is in science. I know this is a famous topic that Atzilus brings. So what do you see from this? That looking at something is not just an external look. It's not just ha'ara bilvad. It's ashpa atzmis. Because of, and the Eitz Chaim writes, v'zeh yera heyesh keich mamoshes b'staklus einayim. This indicates that there's a koich mamoshi, there's an actual power when you look at someone with staklus einayim, through vision. So from this we realize that Er Ariyah is more than just a channeler. It's not just what's the word I want to use? Like when you look through a like a cylinder or something, you look through a tunnel of light, a tunnel, that it itself is a carrier. Er Mamoshi. V'ayim mashin is ill, and delve on what we learned earlier. The Er Ariyah b'chinas Er Asmi rak sheba ayidei helem chaymer ayin. That the Er Ariyah take originates, it's an Er Atzmi. That's why it itself can see it, because it comes from Chochma. It's the power of vision. However, when it comes into the physical eye, it gets concealed in the matter of the eyeball. And that's why we have limits. We can't see in the dark, we can't see very far, only 50, 60 mil. But fundamentally, Er Ariyah is a Er Mamoshi. That's what he's saying here. So in other words, the Sanhedrin, who are Einei Ha'eda, were not just smart people who were able to look into the books, into the Torah, and tell us that and give us guidance. They fundamentally had that clarity. It became one with them. That's what he's saying here. And that's why they were misaken the brachas. Umebchinis istaklis the arich ampin nimshachen meichen lezun. And therefore the istaklis of arich ampin, which is a powerful force, to the point it's like literally an intimate energy. Nimshachen meichen lezun, that draws meichen into zon malchus. Li is bchinis yichud bezun. That Zamal, there should be a yichud, a unification. V'zeu gam came, and this is also shachachomim einei ha'eda tiknu bichas ha'mitzvos. This is what it means, that the chachomim, the einei ha'eda, that's why they're called einei ha'eda. The visual, the eyes of the community, they established bichas ha'mitzvos, the blessings from mitzvos. Shezeu amshachah b'mchinas istaklut arech ampin. That's amshachah from the gazing of Arich Ampin, Lias b'chinas yichud zun al yidei mitzvahs. There should be the yichud of Zal Malchus, that's through mitzvahs. So in Bayis Rishon, this was accomplished just through doing the mitzvahs. But in Bayis Sheni, that's what the Chachamim did. V'hainu Lias gilu ha'er b'chinas Malchus, shaloi b'chinas hester v'helem. So they did something, that it shouldn't be in a state of concealment and covered and concealed, but it should be a gilu in Malchus, literally in a revealed way, that's the bracha, that the amuna that they had should be keilu roya, like they saw it with their own eyes. This is the transmission from Chochma, which is a level of vision and revelation. Like he writes in the Siddur, Drush Lag Ba'emer, in the explanation. Rab Shlomo, you're there?
How is it different from Oyer HaShemesh?
What's that? Before that, I wanted to ask you, before I asked you, when it says Ila Zeis, is Ila Zeis mean however, or Ila Zeis, and because of this, how do you translate?
And therefore.
Ila Zeis means therefore?
Yeah.
Does it ever mean however? Ila Zeis, like omnom or ach? Does it ever mean that?
Ilule zois means without this. Ila zois means therefore.
Okay, so then it's good what I said before. Therefore, yeah. Right. Okay. The difference between sunlight and eyesight.
Yeah.
Well, he hasn't stated yet the difference, and if I mean, ultimately, I think the anayim are going to be higher because they are seeing entities. The sun doesn't see; the sun shines. Here, there's an element of vision. So, though the sun is a source of light, and there's a powerful source of light, and we will say ve'einenu me'ires keshemesh kireach. But I think the anayim have an additional element that they see, and they themselves are seeing entities. So, for example, why don't you call the Sanhedrin? You say Moshe is pnei chama. And here we're calling it einei ha'eda. Why not like shemesh ha'eda? Because they shine. Because I think there's something deeper than. But he hasn't stated yet, and I don't want to speculate what it's going to be. I want to see how he explains it further. I think the shemesh is going to be compared to Torah, the light that today an eye needs to be able to see. But the neshamas and einei ha'eda, they are the actual seers. I think that's how he's going to explain it. But he may not explain it entirely. So far, he's explained the mila of einayim over levana, that he made very clear. That he said in the previous page, that the levana is choshuch be'esem, and the eyes are seeing entities. But he never made a comparison between einayim and shemesh, just for the record. Also, another thing, when you say einei ha'eda, they guide us. The shemesh shines. But what happens in a place of darkness where there's no sun? Middle of the night, the sun is not shining. Or in the case of Alma Diskasia, it's concealed. So the shemesh doesn't have the power to make birchas hamitzvahs. There you need einei ha'eda, you need leaders to do that. So they may use the power of the light of the sun. What we'll learn, the power of Torah. But you need someone that bridges the concealed and the hidden. The concealed and the revealed, I should say. Just one second. I just want to see the Torah air a minute. I think he says something. 1 second. I'm looking now at L'Hovanin HaBrachas from the Alter Rebbe. Yeah. Yeah, Bisman. Yeah, he says these words, but Bayis Rishon lo yahya mevarchim. Why? Because Bayis Rishon neshamis Yisrael b'mayla el yena. Neshamis were very high. Vay Erein Sof Sheirim Izgala b'nafsham lias eslam gili amunazu ki ilaraya. So in Bayis Rishon, the neshamis were a higher level. So Erein Sof was revealed in them. In their amunah was revealed as if they saw godliness. Ach. Bizman Bayishen lo yahya neshamis b'mayla el yena kol kach tiknu anshe knesset agdela brachas lahamshel gili amunazol lias b'chinas baruch v'nimshel chavaya lamato, like in a form keilu raya. Interesting how he teaches Asher Kedishanu Hashem Eloshen Daha. Shunisinas tam lemer leda ledavar kalem lefisha kedishanu asher kedishanu lefisha kedishanu b'mitzvaysav. Interesting. So that's what the brachas are, to draw it in. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Now I'm going to continue the next paragraph. Va'inyan hu. Now, for the record, these pieces that we're learning now are a combination of the Torah Eir the Havanin Habrachas, and Lakuta Teira Veschanon and the beer. And the Tzemach Tzedek has a long mimer with his notes, gloss, hagos, on this mimer of Lahavanin Habrachas. So some of the ideas here are taken from the Tzemach Tzedek's mimer.
I have a question. Did you ask for questions or you want to go weiter?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Earlier the Rebbe said about bracha, he said, "Uperish makor l'chaim hainu bechinas or hakeser the Atzilus shu nikra bechinas makor v'shorish l'chol nitzalim l'cholam shachos moichin b'Atzilus havil hamshich behem tamid bechinas or chadash." I always thought the difference between a bracha and tefillah was that a bracha brought down what is already there in Atzilus, whereas tefillah can create new hamshachas. Here it seemed to be indicating that a bracha is bringing down from Keser a new light into Atzilus. Is that a different perush for bracha than when I had learned or I thought I'd learned?
No, it's a good note. It's a good point you're making. Firstly, in brachas itself, there are different levels. So generally what you said is correct. Bracha and tefillah, bracha only reveals, and tefillah is yehiratzin, something new. But sometimes in some Maimorim, the Rebbe has one of the brachas that he gave Erev Yom Kippur, I think maybe Tafshin Nun and Aleph maybe. He talks about it, that in some places when bracha is discussed, a bracha could also be seen in two ways. One is a bracha reveals, and one is a bracha that brings a chadash. But here, that's not when you're comparing it to tefillah. That's a bracha itself. So there's a bracha that just reveals. Here, he clearly is saying it's not just revealing from Alma Diskasa to Alma Disgala, there's also something new that's coming with it. So I would say in bracha, when you break it down, there is an element that a bracha has the power to bring something new. But overall, when you compare it to tefillah, tefillah is really the chadash, and bracha is not so much chadash. Additionally, the Rebbe brings there about Birchas Kayanim. Birchas Kayanim has the mila of both. It's a bracha and a tefillah. And he speaks about both those elements. Let me just see if I can find it quickly. If I could, 1 second. I think it was Tafshin. What year was it? I don't think it was. It was Manalef, maybe. Just a second, I'm looking it up because it may be helpful here. Yeah, Tafshinun Aleph. There's a bunch of footnotes about it. Let me see. I think he says it explicitly. 1 second. Okay. Yeah, I would also say that the bracha brings a chadash, and tefillah brings a rotzen chadash. I think that's also something you could under emphasize. A rotzen chadash is like yehi rotzen. A new chadash is not necessarily the same level. That's my quick response to that.
I think there are few types of brachas. Brachas, like Eliezer said, Bechlal is what is already there, you bring down. But there is a level, maybe it has to do with the with a higher Rebbe that the bracha is having both things, like I mentioned from the Rebbe Birkas Koyanim, that is concluding both things.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I would say one more thing. When you talk about tefillah and bracha, you often talk about, you ask someone to daven for you, or you ask someone for a bracha, let's say from a Rebbe. You want a blessing from him, or you want him to daven for you? So there, like the story with Yaakov's brachas, that's where we learn it. When Yaakov was blessing Ephraim and Menashe, so the question is, why didn't he just give Menashe the blessing of the firstborn? Why did he have to cross his hands? Because the answer is because there was not tefillah, it was bracha. Since he was giving him a bracha, he couldn't give him something that he didn't have. The bracha for Menashe was not, for Ephraim was not shaykh to Menashe. What Yaakov was doing was revealing the source of Ephraim's blessing, and that's why he couldn't do something new. He only gave him what he deserved, what was already stored for him. The thing that the bracha does, it opens up the channel that's closed. A tefillah, in other words, for example, if God forbid, there's a decree in heaven that a person should, his life is coming to an end, a bracha is not going to help. A tefillah can actually change God's will. A bracha is only going to reveal something that's there, but not revealed yet. So let's say a bracha for children, a bracha for parnas, or a bracha for healing even. What it's meant to be to heal, but it's not revealed, so the bracha reveals. Here, we're talking about brachas ha-mitzvahs. And I think it's a very different type of bracha. The bracha of the Anshe Knesset Agdela, the Chachamim, in Bayesheni, they were mesaken to make a bracha on a mitzvah, Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvah B'Tzivanu, and that is a far higher power than just a blessing. I'm not minimizing the power of a bracha, don't get me wrong. But I mean, here he's clearly bringing that this is a real powerful hamshacha. This is opening up the doors of Keser to enter into the world of Atzilus. Or like he says afterwards, that the Einei Eda, the vision of Arich Anpin, should give birth to something new. Like he said, the gazing of the Bas Haya'ona. So that's not regular. When two people look at each other, that's not usually going to conceive a child, conceive offspring. But this level of gazing is clearly being mamshich something atzmizdik. And I think this definitely is a different category. That's why he brings all the zayhars that's coming from these very high levels. So here, bracha is not just the usual discussion of bracha and tefillah. That I just wanted to add that as well. Once I look at it closer. Yes, Atzilus, the Einei Eda, yeah. Okay, but a good comment. So now he's going to explain what this means more in detail. What does a bracha do that was not there before the bracha? So he says, "Va'inyanhu," the new paragraph. The bracha b'chinas yichudei Elah, shezeh b'chinas gilui. Yeah, he's going to say a bracha is yichudei Elah. Now we know the difference between yichudei Elah, yichudei tata. Is yichudei Elah is called a higher union, where the divine is completely dominant, and what's secondary is existence. Yichudei tata is the other way, that the existence is there, but you recognize within existence is connection to God. Like when you say, we learned it before, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Echad is Aleph, Ches, Dalet. That in the seven heavens and earth, Ches, the 8, and Dalet Ruches, the 4 directions of east, west, north, and south, you see the Aleph of Hashem. That's Yichudei Tata usually. Sometimes it's called Yichudei Elah, and Baruch Shem is Yichudei Tata, just to make it clear. But when you say Echad, he said this before, is the Hisbananus, when you're contemplating and you're looking at existence, you see that God sustains you, you see the world, you see the wonders of the design of existence, and you come to understand Mamala Kalalman. Yichud Elah is, you understand that God is not defined by this world. He's beyond existence. It's not the God that sustains it. It's not like the neshama that gives life to the body. I'm reading on page 1394. He explained that. I'm just looking if he used the word Yichud Elah there. I don't think so. In himself, a Seviv Kalam, he called it. But it's similar to these two levels. The Chochma and Keser. Yeah, maybe it's not really comparable because there he calls it Hedom and not Baracha. One second. There, Baracha. I want to correct myself. I think using that as a comparison was not a good comparison because there he actually used Baracha there as Baracha and Hedah or Kodesh and Baruch on a lower level. So I strike that. I withdraw that. Only thing I don't withdraw is that the concept that with Yichud Elah is talking about the divine that is higher than existence, and Chud Tato is the divine within, so it's concealed somewhat. Hedah is das tachten. I am Ashikosa B'Dibur Maskal Mizmer L'Seda Teda. Hedah is acknowledging something because you're not experiencing the divine in its full intensity. So he's saying now like this: Ubirchas HaMitzvahs, definitely a higher level of bracha here, because there, just a moment, almost confuses the thing. There, bracha was Yitzira, and Hedah was Bria, Kaddish. One second. Yeah, he's talking on a higher level bracha here for sure. It says ubirchas ha-mitzvahs, and the blessings we make on mitzvahs, shuliyas yichud zun. Like I said from the Torah, Asher kedushanim mitzvahs v'tzivanu. The Torah teaches Asher means like from the word liyes, because you sanctified us with your mitzvahs. So baruch Hashem l'kein machal Asher kedushanim mitzvahs and v'tzivanu, and you bound us. So that means, like he says, I'm just reading from Torah, what the blessing means. That the blessing means, let me just, 1 second. So you bring Mamsha Gilead and Sof. Ach, Mugdim L'Bracha. Sher Meloshan Dahal Loshan Sinus Tam Mufisha Run as well Loshan Tzaddik. That's why yet L'chein Yeshlanu Keach LaHamsha Gilead and Sof Baruch Hu B'Bracha Zu. Okay. So he says, "Ubrichas HaMitzvah Shuliyas Yichud Zun." And the business is there should be the yichud of Zoh and Malchus, which is what mitzvahs accomplish. A yichud of Zoh and Malchus, sheti amshacha b'pchinas Malchus, that the transmission should be in the level of Malchus. Ha'enuliyas amshacha the yichud ilah b'yichud tata. That the higher level of yichud, of God's unification as it is beyond, should be united with yichud tata. That also Yichud Tata, the Yichud as it is below, within existence, should also have the Gilead of higher than existence. Like he writes in the Siddur and Shar Birchas Hamazon, Ubelukut Teira Dibra Mascha V'Achalta V'Savota B'Inyan Birchas Ha'aretz. Yeah, Birchas Ha'aretz. The blessing we make on Birchas Ha'aretz. וזהו המשך מבחינת החוכמה, מבחינת מלכוס, עליית הגילה למטה. This המשך מבחינת חוכמה and malchus, and that the gili should be below. Let me explain this in simple English to make this a little simpler and easier to understand. When you gaze at a piece of art, you look at art and you appreciate the beauty of the art, which is an example for looking at the universe and existence and our lives and appreciating the godliness that created us. That's Yichud Tata. You're connecting the Tata, the existence, to its maker. But it doesn't necessarily tell you much about the creator himself. It tells you about what he created. Yichud De'Ilah is the experience where you actually get to know the one who created Hashem, the artist. So in the Beis tradition, the Neshamas were on a higher level and they knew that on their own through the mitzvahs. In Beis Sheni, the Neshamas were lower, so they needed the bracha. The bracha accomplished that. These Einei Ha'eda, these Chachamim, they had the power to reveal that deeper amunah that every Jew has in a way that you can actually see the godliness, not just within the art, but the godliness within the creator, the God himself, the Yichud De'Ilah. That's what he's essentially saying. That in Malchus, you should have what the Gili of Chochma. That's Yichud De'Ilah and Yichud Tata. So Malchus is calling Yichud Tata here, and Chochma is calling Yichud De'Ilah. And this is also what he says in Torah Er, that's the words he uses. That the Amunah should be as if you're seeing it. By the Ganav that steals and davens to Hashem, his Amunah is not in the way he sees it. It's removed. It's detached. It's a dissonance. You want the Amunah to be like you're seeing it in front of your eyes. Not above, but within you. So he says that's the meaning. Now, like he writes in the Maimer Kisisa, which was line 4. So what does he say there? That it should be like Riyah. Like it says elsewhere about raise your eyes to heaven and see. It's more than just contemplating, it's seeing. And same thing with contemplation, that it should be in a form of visualizing. Like he said before, it should be negeya to the very core of his being, not just as an abstract idea. The kol zeh yesh leimer, all this you can say, shezeh inyan yichud elah v'yichud tata. This is the yichud, unification of these two levels. Yichud Tata is when you relate to it through contemplation, but you don't see it. And Yichud De'Ilah is that you relate it like your mom is seeing it with your own eyes. That it touches you to your core. The Sheirish Hamshacha, and the root of this transmission, whom Mebchinas Istaklus Hanal, is from that level of gazing, that when you gaze at something, you are able to internalize it in an intimate way. That's why Dafka the Chacham, because they were such gazers, they had that capacity to unite with something like on a visual level. That's why they were the ones that decreed and established these blessings. Is it clear, or do you need more explanation? Because it's very, language here is very, very brief and curt almost. That's why I'm stopping if you want me to explain more. But that the general idea is pretty clear. The Rebbe Rashab is just really being very medayik, being very precise in the language of these Maimorim that he's quoting. So you have to really learn the Maimorim to really understand everything he's saying. I'm just telling you the main point is this, what we're discussing. But anybody has any questions or want me to clarify further, please don't hesitate. So just I'll give a little more of a flavor to it this way. Let's talk more begashmius in the physical world. There are people who are smart people and understand things. But then there are people who see things. You ever have a situation where you come to a point of such an epiphany and such clarity, it's like as if you saw it with your own eyes. So sometimes someone comes to you and asks you advice. You give them advice based on your experience, based on your knowledge. But then there's a level of expertise that you say, like a person, like actually I see it with my own eyes. That type of clarity. And it's a higher level of clarity. And that's why there are experts in different areas. I remember once I was dealing with somebody who was going to a doctor, and they couldn't find the real issue, the real problem. And the doctor said, you have to go to the doctor of doctors. They sent someone to a big doctor somewhere. And when the doctor said that doctor, when he will check it out, he sees things we don't see. Just has that experience. That doesn't mean so he physically sees it. It's just like some people, I don't know, I'm sure I've heard people who look at a certain map and they'll just see patterns that others don't see. Same thing with business people. They'll see numbers and they'll see something that someone else doesn't see. What is it they're seeing? Is their extensive experience and trial and error, I'm assuming. And in general, maybe they're blessed with a gift. They can just see more than the regular eye can see. So now we relate to this very much in Gashmizdika things. You look at something, you'll just see a regular flow, and someone else will see a pattern, or they'll see an emerging opportunity or something like that. The same thing is in Ruchnius. There are people who learn Torah and they understand what it says in Torah. Then there are people who are seers. When they learn Torah, they see the subject matter like you're seeing with your own eyes. So when it says that the Jews by Matan Torah, it says, V'roas ha'kolos, they saw the sounds. Now there was a visual experience, and they actually saw the sounds. We usually hear sounds. We don't see sounds. Because when you become so connected to it, you can experience it like you see it with your own eyes. So in Ruchnius, there's also levels. Not everybody is called Einei Ha'eda. Not every Rav, every rabbi is going to be called a visionary or the eyes of the people. You say that on particular Sanhedrin. You say it on particular people, you say that. Because they're not just learning and understanding what God wants. They see it in the point of experiencing it like you're visualizing it. So the only way we really can relate to is by finding something that we see with such clarity. We could say, now I know how this type of tzaddik or this chacham sees Torah with such clarity, or sees what God wants with such clarity, which is much more than just reading about it. Like some people read, they can tell you what it says in the books, and there are people who actually visualize. I hope I'm explaining it with some more clarity here, but that's really what he's coming to say. That's why these chachamim, the Einei Ha'eda, they had a deeper experience of Elokus, so they were able to be mesaken these brachas and give us the power to be able to also experience it ki'ilu roya. They not just have faith and amunah, but actually as if you're visualizing, as if you're seeing it with your own eyes. Not just you believe that God's hand is here, but you actually see it. Like some people who say, I saw a miracle. I didn't just believe in a miracle. I didn't just hear about a miracle. I hope that's helpful. Any questions? Okay, so the hashgacha comes from istaklus, from gazing, from being able to gaze. Now comes a parenthesis. Let's see how long this goes. Okay, it's not that long. I'll do the parentheses and maybe then we'll stop. It says, that's Ekev. L'kutei Teira in the Maimer V'Achalta, he says, the Liyah is b'chinas bitla hayesh d'yichud tata. There we go, bitla hayesh. Top of page 1401. Hu shenimshach meb'chinas chochma law b'chinas yichud law. Being that the bitla hayesh is shenimshach, it's drawn from chochma law, which is yichud law. And just to explain this again, in Yichud Tata, I exist, but I've come to realize that I should be bottled to godliness. So there's a yesh that's bottled. Yichud law, I don't feel myself in existence altogether. I'm completely absorbed in a higher reality. Hu levade ve'ein zulase. Him alone and nothing else. It's an einaid malvade experience. So he's saying now that the bitla yesh of Yichud Tatosh, it comes from the Chochma law of Yichud law. So the Rebbe Rashab has come, what does that mean? Now we've been learning Yichud, the Yichud of Yichud law, Yichud Tata. But he says that Yichud Tata comes from Yichud law. He says, with Tzorech Leimer da Kavona, you have to say the intention there means the Liyah is b'chinas bitla yesh, b'chinas Yichud Tata, b'chinas bitla mamish. Being that there is this layesh is a bitl mamish, it's a complete nullification, which is like he said in Veschanon, that it's not just a contemplation, but it's negei be'etzmes hanefesh. It penetrates him through and through. Li'es ruche v'neshmasa elov yasef, that his spirit and his neshama should be gathered, should be longing to connect, because that through his contemplation is in a form of riyah. Like we said before, that creates that not just that he's understanding it, but he's seeing it, meaning it's fully experienced in that way. So even though, why is it called bitla yesh? Because it's not gilei mahus mamish. He's not revealing the very personality of it. Kamoi b'yichudei law, b'kol mokim hu b'chinas riyah. Nevertheless, it's in the level of riyah. I have to explain this because he's basically saying that even in bitla yesh and yichud tata, there's also a level of seeing. Like it's discussed elsewhere, this is the Hidah of Bina. Okay, okay. Yeah. And that means that this Amshach is Yichud Allah and Yichud Tata. Yichud Tata should be like Yichud Allah. Okay, let me explain. I believe I understand it. Till now, we were talking about two levels. One is you exist, but you appreciate godliness within you. You see the art, and you appreciate the artist that made this art. But it's still the godliness within you, and it's on your terms, and it's a form of shmiyah. You heard, you're like hearing it. Or haidah. You're acknowledging it. It's not in a form that you're seeing it with your own eyes. Yes, you see it as it affects you, but not that you're seeing the godliness with your own eyes. It's like that. Then we learn the second level is Yichudei law. Yichudei law is that you're completely absorbed in godliness. He's saying now there's a middle level where Yichudei Tata begins to receive something from the message of Yichudei law. That means that it's not just that you understand godliness within you, you're actually experiencing something that resonates. But it's still on your terms, but it's resonating like visual. So it's not mamish Yichudei law. You're not completely absorbed in the source, but it's more than just understanding it. And he calls that the Hidah of Bina. So it's Yichud Tata, but it's Yichud Tata as it's being influenced by Yichud Elah. So it's like an in-between place between the art and the artist. You don't quite see the artist, but it's not just purely the art either. You are experiencing in the art something visual from the artist. That's the way he seems to be explaining it. Yeah, that's what he's saying here. So there could be bitla yesh, regular bitla yesh mamish, like you're seeing it, and then there's bitla mitzias, or what we call yichudei elah. That's what he added in this parentheses, but it's very, very dense and brief, and that's why it needs elaboration. That's the addition of this parentheses. So there's a third level here, yichudei elah, there's yichudei tata, and there's yichudei tata under the influence of yichudei elah. Example I would give is the following. I remember a chassid, when he came first time to the Rebbe, so he was from a different country, and he had never seen the Rebbe before. He never heard about the Rebbe even, at some point. Then he was introduced to a chassid. This was in Russia. He was introduced to a chassid who also did not see the Rebbe, but was a real chassid. And he heard a lot about the Rebbe, and he heard from chassidim who did see the Rebbe, and so on. So this guy who was just a regular person, never saw the Rebbe, never heard about the Rebbe, became very inspired and became a real chassid. Then years later, he finally came out of Russia, came to the United States, and the first time he came, and he saw the Rebbe actually with his own eyes. And I remember him verbringing. And he was asked the question. I'm the one that actually asked him the question. He was asked, what's the difference between what you experience now and what you experienced in Russia? So he said it was 3 stages. Stage 1, he didn't even know the concept of elokus, how it could be embodied down below and seeing something that is like so dedicated completely. And he learned about it, he heard about it from this chassid. And he was very, very inspired by it, to the point that he changed his life. And he would always he said, whenever I was looking for clarity in my life, I would open up a mimer, I would learn a sikha, I would go to Fabring with Chassidim. So it was all back then. He says, then when I came here and I saw the Rebbe myself with my own eyes, then it was a whole different reality. Now it wasn't just something I heard, and it wasn't just something that I experienced, which was more than just what I was like before I ever heard about it. But now I was seeing it. So I said, no, what does that mean? He says, just, you're completely lost, because it's not just a story. It's not just an experience. It's you become one with it because you are in it. It's like he said, like a fish outside of water, you can tell the fish what it feels like to be in water. But until you're not in the water yourself, you don't really experience it. So I'm thinking maybe something like that. There's a stage where you're just a yesh, and there's bitla yesh, but it's you haven't experienced anything on the Rebbe level. Then there's the Yichud Tata, which is also a better madrega than yesh without bitl. Then there's a level where you meet chassidim and you start learning about a higher reality called godliness, sevav kalalman, a Rebbe, and so on. And it takes you and realizes that not just to be a refined person, but you're experiencing something higher. But you haven't seen it with your own eyes yet. You're not the fish in water. You're just living among people who've experienced it. And then real Yichud Elah would be when you're actually yourself that fish in water and you come and see it and experience it in its fullest way. So you see here stages of levels of bittul, and you can define it into 3 general stages. Yichud Tata. Yichud Tata, it's affected by Yichud Elah, and actually Yichud Allah, which of course is quite difficult to reach in the way he's explaining it here, because that's Mamish Gilui Amahus Mamish. I was just giving an example that relates more to us. And I think we can find examples of these different stages of experiencing a higher reality, which is ultimately Yichud Elah as it affects Yichud Tata. Okay. I'm going to stop here. After the parentheses on top of page 1401, Va'atam, Masha Chachamim B'Keicham, and that we'll learn tomorrow. Any questions, any comments, anything? Okay. So let's stop here, top of page 14.